Hi, this is Eric from DevOpsTechBlog.com. In this demo, we're going to be creating a Kubernetes deployment with some Nginx images. Deployments allow you to easily roll out versions of your app. Let's say you're working with your development team and they need to make an update to their app. What Kubernetes deployments would do is they would spin up new pods, which are the basic units of a Kubernetes cluster. They contain your containers. So usually there's one or more containers to each pod. And what the deployment will do is if once you make that change to the new version, it would automatically roll out the new pods containing that app. And the new pods would be created before any old pods would be taken down. So it makes sure that your cluster is highly available and all the pods that you need are always up at all times. And what Kubernetes does is it checks your pods, it does health checks and makes sure that all your pods are healthy. You could also use this template we're going to create to easily scale up or scale down the amount of pods you need. And we're going to do that in this demo. I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is use kubectl to check if we have any deployments. So it's kubectl get deployments. No resources found, so this is going to be our first deployment. And in order to create our first manifest file for our deployment, I'm going to use vim, and I'm going to call it Nginx deployment, and make sure we specify that it's a YAML file. Okay, I'm going to press I for insert. Now there's 4 main fields for every Kubernetes file that we have to make sure we add. The first one is API version. Okay, for this deployment, we're using apps/v1. Next, we have to make sure we specify the kind, which is deployment. Next, we have to specify the metadata, and I'm going to use spaces to move my cursor over, and we're going to give it a name, Nginx deployment. Next, we have to specify some labels. I'm going to use app Nginx. And finally, we have to specify the specifications, so that's spec. And the first spec we have to specify is the amount of replicas we want. So I'm going to use 3. So that means that at all times, this cluster needs to have 3 replicas of my pod up at all times. And something very important, the next thing we have to do is specify the selector. And this just lets Kubernetes know which pods to create for our deployment. Okay, so we're going to use match labels. And I'm going to name it app Nginx. Next, we have to specify the template for our containers. And specify the metadata. And labels for our containers. And finally, the spec for our containers. So it's just containers and give it a name. I'm just going to name it Nginx container. And we have to specify the image we want to use. For this demo, we're using Nginx. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use one version, which is going to be 1.17.1. And what we're going to do in the demo in a little bit, we're going to be updating our version, and you'll see how all the pods will change with our updated version. And lastly, we specify the ports we want open for our Nginx web server. Container port. So we're going to open up port 80. And once we're done with our file, we could press escape, :WQ. That'll save our file. And the way to create our deployment, we use the kubectl command line, create -F to specify that we're using a file and the name of our file, which is nginxdeployment.yaml. Okay, so if everything worked out, you'll get this message saying that the deployment was created. So I'm going to check to make sure that our deployment is created. So I'm using the word deploy instead of typing out the whole world deployments in Kubernetes. This is just a short form of the word, and that'll work. So we get our Nginx deployment, and it's saying 3 of 3 ready, which is the 3 pods and 3 replicas. Up to date 3, available 3, and they've been up for 28 seconds, so that's good. We could also do a kubectl get pods, and you can see here that our Nginx deployment pods are here, and Kubernetes assigned each one a hash, and they're running. 0 restarts, so everything looks good. We can also do a kubectl describe deployment and the name of our deployment. So here we get some information, some details about our deployment. It's telling us which image we're using. So we're using 1.17.1 for Nginx, 3 replicas created. And the next thing that I want to show you is how we can edit our file to change the amount of replicas and also change the version of Nginx. Okay, so now we're going to use the kubectl command to scale our deployments, and we're also going to change the image of our deployment. So the way to do that is kubectl scale deployments / the name of our deployment. And we have to specify the replicas. So before we had 3, we're going to change that to 5 and press enter. And you can see here that our deployment was scaled. So if I do kubectl get pods, we now have 5 pods running all together. And if I wanted to change the image version, it's kubectl set image deployments / Nginx deployment, which is the name of our deployment. And then the name of our container, which is Nginx /container, which we specified in our file, equals Nginx :1.17.7. So before we had version 1, now this is going to be version 7, and press enter. So if I do a kubectl describe deployment Nginx deployment, we can see here that our image is now 1.17.7. I can do a kubectl get pods, and we have our 5 pods. And that is how you create a deployment, and you can see how easy it is to scale and change the version. And thank you for watching.